Lazar claims our government captured alien spaceships, UFOs, and keeps them in a secret warehouse. And that's not all. Bob says Uncle Sam hired him to figure out how they fly. If you're skeptical, you have plenty of company. Lazar has been questioned and criticized.
Pilots and other military personnel have been reporting these kinds of sightings for years. A couple weeks ago, the Department of Defense even released footage shot by a Navy Super Hornet pilot.
No distinct wings, no distinct tail, no distinct exhaust. It seemed like they were aware of our presence because they would actively move around us.
These newly released videos from the Department of Defense, part of a once secret government program, has spent at least $22 million since 2007 looking into UFO sightings.
So it's really not a question of, do governments believe UFOs are real? Yes, they do. The United States government does. The British government does. The question is, do they have any idea what they are?
Whatever these things turn out to be, there is a serious defense, national security, and air safety issue here. The problem was that just the pop culture baggage from the term UFO, flying saucer, little green men, people don't take it seriously, but they should.
You used to work at Area 51.
Well, you know, we want to be accurate.
Okay.
Area S4.
S4. Okay.
It's about 15 miles south of Area 51.
There's been an operating airbase out at the location known as Area 51 since the 1950s. It became the test flight center for the F-117 stealth fighter and the B-2 stealth bomber.
Within the Area 51 compound, you can call that a subset of Area 51.
Absolutely no ET craft, ET technology, anything like that at Area 51. This is why S4 was made specifically to separate it there. People at Area 51 do not have the clearance. I was paid by the Department of Naval Intelligence. That's where my checks came from, so I can only assume that they were in charge.
This time that I went in, there were hangar doors open.
I don't think there were any underground levels to it, though there could have been. It just looked like an installation that was butt up against a mountain. It's difficult to really surmise how long it had been operational. Everything did look fairly new. Nothing was worn. Things looked fairly freshly painted.
I went in through the hangar door, and in the hangar door was the disc, the flying saucer that I worked on.
We came out, and I saw the disc in the hangar. Upon seeing it, it struck me that, well, this explains all the UFO sightings. Not thinking that it was an extraterrestrial craft, that this must have been some advanced form of fighter that we've been working on for years. And this is why people keep seeing flying saucers, because it's ours and we've just been testing it probably for all these years. It never even occurred to me, even though I was looking at an extraterrestrial vehicle, that, you know, this wasn't man-made.
That was the first time I had seen anything that was weird. It was some time later that I was introduced to my lab partner, Barry, and we had some of the subcomponents of the craft, and it was in the demonstration of the reactor working where it caught my attention to where this is technology that doesn't even exist.
There were 22 people with Majestic clearance. I had Majestic clearance. Majestic clearance was designated as clearance 38 levels above Q clearance, and Q clearance is the civilian top secret clearance.
Hemisphere about the size of a basketball on a metal plate. It produced a gravitational field of its own. Now this is something that we can't do. We can't produce any gravity. And Barry said, go ahead, try and touch the sphere. And I couldn't. It pushed my hands away, just like two like poles of a magnet. That immediately caught my attention, going, wow, this is something else. Back engineer and see if we can duplicate the technology with available materials. They compartmentalize everything. Now, we had the power and propulsion system. It made it very clear that what I read was accurate.
I was put into the briefing room with 121 or 22 briefings and really was just told to sit and read through them. I think they were there just to mainly educate me on what was going on. They weren't a complete in-depth explanation on everything else, but just essentially a brief synopsis on some of the other projects that were going on there.
I really didn't consider it being all that possible as far as being the actual thing that I was going to work on at the time. There's no wiring that connects any of the subcomponents together whatsoever. They just have to be in the immediate vicinity. The stuff is borderline magic. There was some progress. I mean, we did identify, at least we think, some processes and had a rough idea, we think, of what was going on. But I think this is a problem that they've had for a long time.
I didn't see this, and I don't know it to be fact, but this is what I was told, that I was hired to replace one of a couple people that were killed while working on one of the reactors from one of the crafts. Apparently they, for whatever reason, cut open an operating reactor, and the device exploded, killing both of them. The scientists that were killed there, allegedly the detonation from the explosion was fairly large. It would have rivaled a small tactical nuke. So it was done at the Nevada test site, and it was to be passed off as an unannounced nuclear test.
Yeah, I think what they were trying to do was cut into one. The excitement kind of turned to dread at some point. It's incredibly dangerous to tinker with something like that. And, in some respects, we were guinea pigs, just try to find out how to make this thing. There was some paperwork that indicated that this was from the Zeta Reticuli star system.
Supposedly, the information, now this isn't something that I determined, it's something I was told, that the crafts originated from a planet that orbited the Zeta Reticuli star system. Zeta Reticuli 1 and Zeta Reticuli 2 are two stars of a binary star system. The craft allegedly came from there.
Yeah. Now, how they obtained that, I haven't the slightest idea. What they called ZR3, so it was a third planet in that star system. Zeta Reticuli is a binary star, stars that orbit one another.
Read Zeta Reticuli. We're like, what in the is this?
Well, reading all of the stuff, it was what in the is this?
How specifically did the briefings detail how the aliens manipulated our genetics over the centuries?
It mentioned 65 or 63 corrections or additions to the genetic makeup that finally resulted in, a human creature. Allegedly, this interaction has occurred since, man was a simian creature, and, there were genetic alterations made.
Well, we came up with a bunch of reasonably good ideas about how the reactor worked. And one of them was the square base of it was essentially like a cyclotron, which is a small particle accelerator, long tube essentially, and they accelerate particles with high voltage and, radio frequencies till they reach high speeds. But a cyclotron does that in a small circular area. And there's this very heavy element fuel, element 115, something that wasn't on our periodic charts at the time.
115 is strictly an extraterrestrial material. It probably occurs naturally in some other places, maybe other star systems. Some people not familiar with science or chemistry say, well, that's ridiculous, all the elements occur on Earth. But that's not true. There are elements on the periodic chart that aren't found on Earth. 115 isn't that far away. And when they synthesize it, it's not like they're making a couple ounces of it. They're talking about 1 or 2 atoms of it. To make any usable quantity of a heavy element like that is virtually impossible.
But it is now.
It is now, yeah.
When did it become on the periodic table now?
I don't remember.
August 27th, 2013. Researchers confirmed the existence of a new element on the periodic table, created through nuclear fusion. They name it Unpentium, or element 115.
There's been a bunch of people that called bullshit on many of the things that you've said, but over time, many of the things that you talked about, even in the 80s, have proven to be true. Things that people said were not true were proven to be true. Element 115 was one of them, right?
Right.
Element 115 is stable. And for those familiar with chemistry, we know that elements with higher atomic numbers have shorter and shorter half-lives. However, when you reach a certain point, they call it the island of stability. There is a place. We've theorized this for a long time. Somewhere around 114 to 116, there should be an area in there where the nucleus of the atom is geometrically stable with protons and neutrons, where it no longer decays. It's not radioactive. 115 is, in fact, this element.
Well, I really don't want to talk about that. No, I'm talking about the 115.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know. I have to think about how I'd...
What is the problem with this?
I don't want to get myself into more trouble by admitting something. So
you were able to get away with a sample of element 115. How much did you get away with?
No comment.
Security agents from the OFI, the Office of Federal Investigation, had been witnessed doing random security checks at his house. There was almost no question in anyone's mind, anyone in Bob's immediate life who talked with him on the telephone that his phone was tapped. I mean, strange things would happen on Bob's phone and really continue to this day.
They somehow or another had acquired a stable version. Did they say that the stable version had come with this craft?
Yeah, it absolutely came with the craft.
I was told that we have 500 pounds by one of my coworkers.
I did get a chance to look inside the craft on only one occasion.
When I first got to look inside the craft, all I can say, it's an ominous feeling. You walk in there and it feels as if you shouldn't be there. I know that sounds kind of corny, but it's a real ominous feeling. It's not an exciting feeling. It brings up a whole lot of questions in your mind. Well, where did this come from? And you know that they won't give you the answers to the whole story.
I don't know if the craft is made of, an advanced metal or a ceramic. It was cold to the touch, so I would lean more towards a metal.
Brushed aluminum, actually just an unfinished stainless steel, not shiny finish to it. Had no seams. It was as if it was injection molded from one giant die.
Everything is one color. It's like a dark pewter color, and there are no right angles anywhere. It's as if somebody took a model and fashioned it out of wax and then heated it just for a short time so everything melted.
So these little 3-foot tallish creatures.
Yeah, and the seats were small too. I mean, obviously it was made, for something small.
Did you have any direct contact or communication with aliens?
No, not at all.
There's nothing else in there. There's just seats, the reactor, and some of the subcomponents. There's no control panels. There's no bathroom. It's just a very bare bones thing. They work on the buddy system, so I can only exchange ideas and talk to Barry. But they're so over the top concerned about security, they split everything off, and everybody becomes stagnant. It just destroys any of the progress you can make.
They turned it over to the scientific community, and not just a couple guys here in the United States. I mean, you need a large group of people in a large lab to research what's going on there, not a little quiet installation. It's the security itself that prevents them from getting anywhere. Science itself must communicate. You have to have a free exchange of ideas. That's how things progress. And when you clamp down on a security system like that, where you work in isolated groups and ideas cannot be exchanged, you don't get anywhere, and that's the problem they have.
Probably why they arrived at this bottleneck, that they needed to get this madman with a jet-powered Honda to come in and see what he could do.
I think that was an act of desperation. I think they wanted someone that thinks out of the box, and let's just give this guy a try here.
I would have much preferred that instead of the Navy or whoever it was that hand-picked a few renegade scientists here and there, that they turn it over to some more qualified people. Obviously, I was not the most qualified person on propulsion or field propulsion or anything of that sort. I was just some guy. I mean, I could have named 10 or 12 other guys that were more qualified than me.
There's 3 levels in the craft. The main level is what we're talking about. Directly under that, those are the gravity amplifiers, the big rectangular objects. Underneath them are the gravity emitters that look like, for lack of a better word, a trash can hanging on a pipe. 3 of those.
I had to hang upside down in there to see the lower level, essentially. And there were 3 large gravity amplifiers. These devices looked like about a 2-foot diameter, 4-foot long piece of pipe hanging by a smaller piece of pipe from the level above, and they can be independently positioned, and that's what emits the gravitational waves that propel the craft.
The top layer, I think that has to do with a navigation or their version of a computer.
Now, you said there's 9 of them, and you got a brief glimpse at the other ones. How are they different?
They looked completely different.
There are 9, and their shapes vary. I only got to do a close inspection on one of them. The others I just briefly saw, and they pretty much varied. I give everything nicknames there. The one I worked on was kind of sleek looking, and I gave it the name the Sport Model. I only entered the Sport Model. The other ones I wasn't allowed to loiter around, to go near, really even to look at. I just, at one point, walking through the hangar doors, all the bay doors between all the hangars were open, and I got a glimpse all the way down, of the whole corridor. But that was the only time it was ever open.
One looked like I called it Jell-O mold, and it looked like a classic Jell-O mold with the rippled sides to it. One was a very flat disc, like a straw hat or something like that.
Whether it was recovered, given, or what, it was not built as a mock-up. It was an alien craft built on another world. There was absolutely no doubt about that.
Barry was there. I think Barry was sleeping there, and he acted like he's been up there for a long time.
As you can imagine, they don't let us out much.
You would call him our supervisor. His name was Dennis Mariani, and kind of a military-looking guy. And he would routinely pop in, during the day and, hey, what's going on, guys? And he would essentially relay any information, anything new we came up with. I mean, he was our go-between. It was really weird that I would be only called in on certain times and certain days. And they would be weird hours, too.
They would call it a specific time. For instance, the operator would say, Mr. Lazar, it's now 4:15 a.m. We expect you to be at McCarran Airport at 4:45. Your plane will be leaving at such and such time. I'd drive there, check in, board the plane, and the plane would fly out to Groom Lake. It would land there. I'd get off the plane and wait, and there would be a bus to take me and whoever else was going to S4, Papoose Lake, which is about 15 miles south of there, and then I would check in at S4. The first trip out there, it was actually very exciting because it seemed so cloak and dagger to me, especially after I got in the bus with the blacked out windows. I kind of thought that was neat. Drove out to the site, and then it was checked in, guards walking around with guns, and I was sure what I was working on was going to be pretty fascinating.
If you're trying to analyze it, all you can do is perform tests. It violated a lot of what we thought was impossible to violate. Any machine, any device that operates always makes extra heat. Nothing works at 100% efficient. Some of that power is going to be converted to heat, and it's just wasted. This didn't.
Element 115 is in the top of the reactor, and the base of the reactor apparently is something similar to a cyclotron. It's a particle accelerator. A particle is accelerated to high speed and then deflected up a small tube, and it's aimed at the 115. This transmutes the 115, similar to the way we do that in a normal particle accelerator. This causes a reaction, a radiation emission that we really haven't seen before. It produces antimatter. This antimatter is guided down a tuned tube and reacts with a gas. When matter and antimatter react, they convert to 100% energy. This energy is converted to electrical power, and this electrical power is used to power other subsystems on the craft, though there is no wiring. That's almost a byproduct of the reactor. The reactor also sets up a gravitational wave from the 115 being bombarded. This gravitational wave was present at the top of the reactor and is essentially guided in the same way microwaves are guided, through tuned tubes. And this goes to their amplifying cavities and through the projectors that are in the bottom of the craft.
No matter what the load was on the reactor, it never got above the ambient temperature, which is impossible. Pulling out huge amounts of power, and nothing ever gets warm.
There is no thermal radiation while the reactor's running. The thermionic generator is 100% efficient, which is in violation of the first law of thermodynamics. But in fact, it works.
We really spent all our time just trying to see what the stuff can do and what we can control. I was in with Barry in the lab, and Dennis came in and said, we're about to run a test. Why don't you guys come out? We went out there, and the craft was already outside the hangar and was just preparing to lift off. It quietly lifted off the ground, which was incredibly impressive to see. It lifted off quietly, and then it hovered silently.
The reactor itself was an incredibly advanced system. This was an antimatter reactor. This is something we could only dream of having, something that could put out huge amounts of power that rivals several nuclear power plants running at capacity.
For that particular time, it took off, moved a little around to the left and right, and then sat back down. It produces a heart-shaped gravitational distortion around the craft. Now, if the craft is sitting in the air and you walk underneath it and look up, you actually cannot see the craft. The light bends around it. You're bending gravity, bends light. It bends radio waves.
That was an extremely impressive test. Maybe to someone that really knows little about science or anything, that wouldn't be a whole lot. But you have to realize this craft was about 52 feet in diameter, I don't know exactly how much it weighed, but it weighed a lot. It's like seeing a house lift off the ground. You can't imagine the energy involved to do that.
They had times they had designated high-performance tests. The high-performance test goes above the mountain range, and they do much more radical moves with the thing. They just play with this thing right over the test site.
Your wife started thinking that you were having an affair.
It was a virtually impossible secret to keep. But I did play by the rules, and it caused a lot of problems. It caused problems in my family life.
Part of the security clearance is that not only do you not have any connections to foreign countries and aren't a maniac, but you have to have a stable home life, too. She started having an affair with a flight instructor. Now, they were monitoring this on the phone, and they knew it, and I didn't.
They viewed that as a potential emotional instability, and they no longer wanted me coming out until things were cleared up, either for it, it to break up or heal or whatever, but that's what put the brakes on everything there.
And they explained this to you, what was happening?
Well, after the fact, yeah, because time kind of went on, and there were guys that were following me around, and I started getting a little concerned. They're not just going to let me hang out at home and go get a new job knowing what I know.
Then I began to wonder, boy, now they've given me all this information and everything's come to a dead stop. What's going on? And that's when I began to be concerned, and then that's when I said, it's becoming important that some other people know.
I took my closest friends and just kind of got together and I said, hey, remember that job I told you about? This is what's going on.
I was quite aware of what could happen, but I was also aware that these guys would go to any extent to keep their secret, and certainly not have someone that was on the inside running around, and I didn't think it was beyond them at all to make me disappear, who knows? I know it sounds more like a movie, but I didn't think it was beyond their capability to kill me, just to stop the word from getting out.
Like, you don't need to take my word for it. Wednesday night, we need to all go out here. I want to show you what's going on.
Bob knew the test flight schedule for the discs and took his wife, his best friend, Jean Huff, and another friend, John Lear, out to the desert near the base on a Wednesday night in March 1989.
It started coming in, too. Did you see that light just come on over there? I was looking right at it.
Shortly after the flight time that I had recorded, an amber light came up off the ground and hovered, and then began doing radical step maneuvers and darting from one side of the sky to the other, doing some impossible flight characteristics.
Do you think what you saw over the desert that night was an alien spacecraft?
Could I identify it as an ET craft without Bob's help? No, it would have been like I said, an elliptically shaped saucer, just doing moves that we're not capable of.
I don't think that's landing lights because it's curved already and we're still looking at it. Looks like he's curving back. Here he comes.
But at times the craft had glowed tremendously bright, where we thought, being miles and miles away, we thought there was something wrong and the craft was going to explode, so much so that we all got behind the car.
It actually came closer. It came down the mountain range toward us to where we could actually see it was elliptically shaped. It looked like something that... It's strange to explain. It looks like an explosion that starts to explode and stops and doesn't explode and dissipate. That's how bright the light is. Your brain interprets it as an explosion about to happen.
You apply enough energy to a gas molecule, they emit photons. They emit light. It's really a byproduct of how the craft operates. When it's emitting that much energy, the gas surrounding the craft emits light. The same reason why lightning is visible. You have a huge electrical discharge, and the gas emits light in the form of lightning bolt. If you were going to see one of these crafts at night operating, it would appear really as a glowing ball or just a bright light in the sky from a distance. Even close up, you'd see a glowing halo around it. This is typically what you'd see in your normal UFO sighting. Bright, strange, jumping lights in the sky. That does explain that.
Hey, we got away with it. We should try it again the next test flight day. And I think it was on the third time that we got caught. I mean, we started becoming a little careless. I think we took a motorhome out there. And, it was like the stupidest thing you could possibly imagine.
Started tailgating.
We went out there, and just for some reason, we just started talking shit. Something about attacking the base. and stealing the craft. Then about 20 feet in front of us, we see a little green light fall on the ground and roll to us. And unbeknownst to us, now it's pitch black, you can't see your hand in front of your face. There were a bunch of guards standing right out there, and they had a night vision scope where they were like from here to the wall looking at us, listening to us. We turned the lights on, and all these guys are there. So we did incredibly stupid stuff and got caught, as we should have. The following day, I went to Indian Springs Air Force Base.
I was in the room with the security guards that caught us, my supervisor and some other people, and some other security personnel.
And this is when they brought out the transcript of the phone call with my wife, and were reading me what my wife and, our friend were talking about. And I don't know, it was a hard time.
They were essentially grilling me about security and, how could I possibly bring people out there? And I guess I wasn't as responsive as they would like, and they got in my face, and one of them pulled the sidearm out, just pushed it against me. That interrogation was about as intense as you can possibly get, right stopping short of shooting me in the head. Everything. They threatened my wife. They said they'd stop at nothing. They said they thought they made that very clear. They couldn't believe that I had taken anyone out there to show them that, much less left with information like the flight test data, and wanted to know what else I had said, who else I had told specifically. They were crazy. They really were. They were completely out of control.
But they did let me go that night, and I went home. And this is kind of when the most stressful part started.
Because you're realizing that you're being monitored 24/7.
Now I know not only am I being monitored, but now I know I'm in trouble.
Bob says that he was put under constant surveillance by security personnel. His phones were tapped, his movements were monitored, and he often found his car followed by military helicopters.
And it wasn't a short time after that I contacted only investigative reporter I had heard of in Las Vegas was George Knapp. Told him some of the story because I had no idea what the hell was going to happen at that point.
I thought if I did an interview in silhouette, it would be kind of pushing back a bit, where say, you guys stop, and not saying too much, but just saying enough just to let them know that I am pushing back a bit and then lay off, or, it's going to get worse. It was really the only thing I could do.
And that's what turned into the famous wrestling match between me and George trying to get the tape, but he won because he was a bigger guy. He got the tape, he put it in the player, and boom, 5 o'clock news was on.
Well, there's several, actually 9 flying saucers, flying discs, that are out there of extraterrestrial origin.
Interview with the shadowy Dennis drew international attention. Portions were broadcast by radio in 6 European countries and in a nationally televised TV special in Japan.
I got a call after that. It was from Dennis. He said, "Do you have any idea what we're going to do to you now?" And he hung up the phone.
Then I decided, well, that's it. And really just said everything that I had seen and done, and just wanted to divorce the entire situation.
No one had associated flying saucers with Area 51 until Bob Lazar's interview hit television screens around the world.
Despite numerous inquiries and feelers, Dennis has remained anonymous until now. His real name is Robert Lazar.
It's like if they can't get the person that's involved, they just create a problem for everybody that surrounds them. It hurt a lot of people's lives that I was connected to. And that's an effective way of shutting someone up.
There was a woman who was a secretary for a major defense contractor at the Nevada test site who worked on nuclear programs, who told me that she had sat in on conversations between military and civilian contractors at which the Roswell case had been discussed. She was ready to tell me about this, and I had this conversation with her on the phone. The next day after this conversation takes place, she's visited by 2 men, reminding her that she is still under a security oath, told her, "We know that you do a lot of traveling back and forth, a lot of long drives between Las Vegas and LA. We'd hate for something to happen to you or your family." No interview. I mean, it happened again and again and again. Same scenario.
So did you feel that by coming forward and going public, they couldn't just snuff you out?
That's what I was told, and George and everybody, said that. It's public. There's, no one will touch you, and I fell for it.
A car came up alongside of me, and I thought he was just trying to race me to get on the freeway. This was after I had left the project. It was a white, boxy-looking car. Exactly what make and model, I don't know. But I accelerated to get on the freeway to go fast, and there was a gunshot, and the back of the car was hit, and I skidded off into the median. It was an attempt on my life, but by who specifically, I don't know. Though I was threatened before I had left. They threatened my wife's life and my life, so I can only put two and two together and say that they were kind of pissed at me.
What happens when we die, and are we alone? Those are the two big questions.
Right. It's a crime that they're not telling the rest of us. I think it's mainly the technology. They just want to keep the technology secret. You literally become invincible once you master the technology.
Space-time and gravity are all essentially interrelated. They all act on one another. Gravity bends space. Gravity also distorts time. When you vary one, you essentially vary the other two.
If you have a machine that makes gravity, you can pretty much do anything. You can affect time. You can have force fields. All that stuff that's in science fiction becomes reality if you have a machine that can make gravity. And what we worked on in the desert was a machine that makes gravity.
Because space-time and gravity are all interrelated, if you could produce gravity artificially, an extremely intense field of gravity, what you could do is actually distort the distance between two objects and make it shorter. Not just distorting the distance, but now you're also decreasing the time between the two places.
You're essentially separated from reality, as crazy as that sounds, with being encased its own gravitational envelope. Inertia is not going to affect it.
What happens is a great gravity distortion is created, and you're essentially bending space toward the craft. The craft becomes part of that space. When the gravity amplifiers are shut down, the craft is essentially where it was focused. It's a very difficult thing to grasp. It happens virtually instantaneously because of the fact that gravity distorts time. And if you're bending space and time along with it, when you wind back up in that place, you're there between the ticks of a clock.
This is how some of those recent sightings with Commander David Fravor.
Clear blue sky, there's no wind, and you see this tic-tac. It's just this white object that's randomly moving around. It makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up a little bit. I remember telling my back seater, I said, dude, I don't know about you, but I'm a little weirded out. It's not a helicopter. It doesn't have rotor wash. There's no propulsion. There's no wings. It rapidly accelerates and disappears, like poof, gone. Weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life.
The thing operates exactly the way I was describing. That's why he was interested to talk to me. Most of the correspondence I get are people trying to get a hold of me going, Bob, you got to listen to me. I'm coming to talk to you. I'm driving from Oklahoma or whatever. But some of them are just batshit crazy, and they're frightening.
I've seen many. I've seen orbs. I've seen stationary lights.
Thought I saw something in the room that I was sleeping in.
Believe it or not, I'm not into UFOs. I don't follow stories.
Before I was at S4, I was more or less one of the guys that thought all these government conspiracy and UFO buffs and things like that were complete lunatics. I even remember before I was involved there, a friend showed me a little newspaper clipping and said John Lear was giving a lecture who was touting that aliens from another world came to Earth and there's 70 different species. And I remember laughing on the phone that this guy had lost his mind. I was also under the impression that, boy, the government's all for the people and they're out here to protect us and all that. After the experiences I had there, everything is completely turned around. I was never interested in flying saucers as a child. Science fiction, I watched Star Trek, I guess, with everyone else back then, but for the most part, I didn't even believe in flying saucers up until I was employed at S4.
Even after your experiences?
No, I'm fascinated with the technology, and it irks me like every night I go to sleep that it was my own doing, essentially, that prevented me from continuing on in the project. I mean, that to be on that cutting edge of technology is so alluring to me.
I would like to have known a little bit more about the technology, probably kept quiet if I could have, and possibly never have said anything.
By the same token, I don't really care that there's aliens or where they come from. I mean, the prize is the technology, and that's what I'm fascinated by. So I don't listen to UFO stories and that sort of thing.
I believe if I was given the opportunity again to go back in time and redo it, I think I pretty much would have just shut up and gone along with the program.
We try and do what we can, and once we reach a roadblock going, we really can't figure it out, it's just friggin' wait. Put the thing away, wait for science to catch up, and, a decade later, let's take the project out again and see, all right, now where can we go? I know you got to keep the technology secret, but you can't not tell everybody that this stuff is going on, that we have, actual hardware from another civilization. It's a big deal, probably the biggest one there ever was.
Obviously, the ET craft do exist. Something had to build them, so there must be aliens. And since there are, and the craft are there must be some sort of factory and an entire civilization somewhere.
There were Russian scientists at S4, and actually in the area at S4 with us.
So you got to communicate with these guys, or you saw them?
No, I knew they were there. Barry would talk about the commies that were there.
The commies?
Yeah, the commies. And
that was back when they were the commies, right?
Yeah,
it was the Cold
they
War.
were real commies. But at some point, there was a big discovery made. Apparently, they decided it was just too cool to share with anybody, and the Russians were never allowed back on the base after that. In typical American fashion, it was, all right, this is ours. You guys get the hell out of here.
Is there any inkling that any other government had something similar?
No, nothing that I had heard.
We knew, again, through intelligence and through open source material, we knew that the Russians and the Chinese and others were working on this too.
The way the craft that we worked on flies is it doesn't fly like a conventional aircraft does, and it doesn't fly like a flying saucer would in a 1950s movie. It flies belly first.
There are 3 amplifiers. The way in which it's propelled are 2 different ways. There's what they call Omicron configuration, where the craft is using 1 generator, or a Delta configuration, where it's utilizing all 3. Delta configuration would be for space travel. Essentially, the craft will tilt up on its side, as opposed to a science fiction movie where you see a flying saucer moving around. The craft will tilt up on its side, focus the 3 gravity generators to a single point, and move through space that way. They'll use 1 gravity generator to lift the craft off the ground. And as opposed to what we're used to, for instance, a plane, once it's in the air, we envision thrust or some force coming out the back of it to push it forward. The crafts work completely opposite of that. What they do is once they're hovering in the air, they'll swing the 2 remaining gravity generators up in front of them and create a distortion, essentially a downhill, and the craft rolls downhill for infinity. It's always chasing a little distortion. That's why they look goofy when they fly around at low speed, because they're essentially, and any time you run over, the gravity field around the Earth is not completely constant and stable. Depending on the minerals and density of the Earth underneath it, gravity will vary somewhat, and you will get odd movements of the craft. So its low speed mode is kind of unstable.
I mean, it may set down conventionally, but it always rotates. It does a roll maneuver, puts its belly towards the target, and then moves away at high speed.
So it would be like a car flying with the wheels forward.
Right. And the gimbal video, you can see the craft do the roll maneuver.
That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is an LNS, dude. Well, if there's like... Look at that thing. It's rotating.
It's really interesting. It behaves exactly like the craft that I worked on. Project Sidekick was supposed to be weapon applications of the craft. Project Looking Glass, any effects of time in the craft. What Commander Fravor saw, he described it as a ping pong ball in a cup and shaking it back and forth. It was moving that fast.
It rapidly accelerates to the south in about 2 seconds and disappears. Oh, well above supersonic. It like a bullet out of a gun, it took off. Talking to some physicists, they don't think the human body could handle that kind of force. I believe, as do the other folks that were on the flight, that when we visually saw it, that it was something not from this world.
There's a gravitational envelope in there which negates any inertia effects.
These pilots were describing seeing these things up to 30,000 feet in the air, flying at extraordinary speeds, hypersonic, well over the speed of sound, changing direction in the most astonishing ways, and seemingly defying the laws of physics.
What's fascinating to me, too, is that you were discussing the way this reactor worked and that these things were not really connected.
No, nothing is connected. There's no wiring at all.
One of the things that's happened to you that has allowed people to discredit you, there's obviously been some sort of an effort to erase your past.
Yeah.
An effort to erase your education history, your employment history.
George Knapp is the Las Vegas TV reporter who first aired Bob Lazar's amazing claims. He says he ran into unusual problems just trying to look into Lazar's background. Though Lazar claimed to have once worked at the Los Alamos National Laboratory, government officials denied they knew anything about him. But when Knapp came up with a phone directory listing Lazar's name, Los Alamos grudgingly admitted he had spent some time there. Officials at the hospital where Lazar was born even denied the simple fact he was born there, until Knapp tracked down the doctor who delivered Lazar.
Completely uncooperative in trying to get information about Bob, and I found that to be the case at every step of the way in trying to verify his background.
His former employers and even the tax authorities were caught covering up and refusing to release information on him. Former NASA mission specialist Bob Exler had heard about Area 51 and Groom Lake when he worked on the Apollo and Space Shuttle projects.
I did a variety of research relative to Bob Lazar. I obtained a copy of his W-2 form. His particular form indicated that he worked for the U.S. Department of Naval Intelligence. They informed me that it was a genuine document. It was not something that had been fabricated. There were a variety of numbers, contract numbers and so forth issued on the document, which I was able to research, again finding that these were highly classified numbers. And then again, with the Social Security Administration, we found that Bob Lazar's records had in fact been bleached clean. There was nothing there, in spite of the fact that the document clearly indicated that Social Security taxes had been taken out of his pay.
I had to wonder whether this guy was making this stuff up, but then I see the phone book and I see the newspaper article, and I talked to people who worked with Bob at the lab and who said, in fact, that he did work on classified projects, yet no one can find any records of his background.
The people that I worked with, colleagues, the people I went to school with, obviously knew I was there, and people at Los Alamos, I was friends with, and people that worked under me and alongside of me knew I was there. And
Bob Lazar is not the only person who's come forward and claimed to have worked out at the base on flying discs. Former US Marines test pilot Bill Uhouse worked out at Groom Lake and other top-secret locations for more than 40 years, working for the Pentagon and civilian contractors on a variety of highly classified projects, including, he says, a flying disc recovered from a crash in Kingman, Arizona in May 1953. Uhouse says that Lazar did work at Area 51.
I think Bob is saying exactly what he knows. Bob Lazar is not lying as far as his place and position and the activity he was involved with at the time.
And this is back in the 80s where when you discuss this, people are like, this doesn't even exist.
Yeah. I put my hand on it, badge popped out, and that's how I could open the doors and get into S4.
And everybody discredited that. They said it was bullshit, it was science fiction. Your education record?
Well, that disappeared also.
I've talked to the schools that he claims to have received degrees from. I've checked on his high school record. I talked to Los Alamos Lab where he was supposedly a scientist and so forth. I have come up totally empty. Now, when a guy lies like that, you get very wary. Somebody in his imagination was, stronger, brighter, faster than anybody else.
You guys just came up with the story to make a bunch of money or get a bunch of attention. I hate attention. I just want to kind of hide in the corner and do my own thing. If you think somehow we came up with this thing, then you got to tell me why we did it.
So really I just go about my life, and that's, something that happened that was fantastic, and it's over, but it's kind of hard to shake it loose, but eventually I will, and that'll be that.
Before you toss Lazar on the pile with all the other UFO wackos, understand that he willingly agreed to take a lie detector test, requested and independently arranged by a Las Vegas reporter. Terry Tavernetti is the ex-cop who administered the test.
If he's lying, he ought to be in Hollywood, because he gave absolutely no physiological indications of attempting deception.
About halfway through that test, I'm looking down, and all of a sudden the realization sets in that I'm looking at a probable, truthful result. And I'm getting chills right now talking about it, because that's what I got. On every chart that I did, The one relevant question that was the same with every test was the last one. Have you deliberately lied to any question concerning the UFO information you've given me? And his answer of no was indicated as being truthful on the charts. So whatever he told me that night, Bob Lazar truly believes to be the truth.
What you're saying makes sense. It doesn't make sense that it's bullshit.
That happened exactly like I said it did, Joe.
I believe you. In closing, is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, I can't think of anything other than really don't come and try to visit me.
There's too much that Bob knows, I think, that couldn't be explained any other way. He knows about the layout of the base. He knew about people who were involved in security checks. He knew when and where the test flights were going to take place because he took people out there 3 weeks in a row and they videotaped the tests. How did he know this stuff if he, in fact, did not have some kind of inside knowledge?
There might have been reason 40 years ago to believe that people couldn't handle the idea of alien visitation. I don't think that's true anymore. I think we're far more sophisticated now.